What's up, Online Empire Academy? Joshua Woodward here, your podcast host. Today's sponsor is the Yorba Label Company. They're giving us 25% off of 3,000 address labels. If you've ever shipped Amazon FBA, you know that you need those address labels. So it's a great deal, guys. Here's how you get it. Go on to Amazon.com, type in address labels, select perfect peel address labels. In the checkout, you're going to use the promo code LABELS25. That's going to get you the 25% discount. It's time to hop in with our guest. Thank you so much for tuning in and enjoy the podcast. What's up, Online Empire Academy? I'm Joshua Woodward, your podcast host. Today, we're going to talk about social media. And I know for some of you, you're like, why does this apply, or how does it apply to my business? But we're going to walk you through the importance of using social media for your business. And this is an area that for me, I didn't understand until my wife started doing social media for our businesses. And I saw the growth and the expansion of what it can do for our business and what it can do for exposure and exposing product to people. So today we have on Laura Roeder, and she is the genius behind Edgar, and it's a social media scheduling and I have my notes, and automation source. And this is something that it's so funny. My wife was just talking to me about this, and she's like, "Hey, we need to get this so it automates all of our different systems into one platform." And I'm excited just to kind of get some knowledge from Laura to kind of figure out how best to use this for our companies. So, Laura, I want to know your story first. How did you get started?
So I started working for myself when I was 22, about 10 years ago. I quit my first ever job to freelance full time, and I've never looked back since. So I've been on the entrepreneurial world a long time. I started out doing websites for local businesses, and that turned into kind of helping them with online marketing. That turned into social media consulting when social media started to become a thing for businesses, and social media consulting became training and information products. And then in 2014, I launched Edgar, which is a social media software.
Wow. It's so cool. One of the things that I kind of am lacking in, like I said before, is even understanding on, like, yeah, I'll post on Instagram or I'll, be on Facebook. But up until about a year ago, I didn't understand how it could even help our business grow. Will you kind of explain what Edgar does and then how it can help our businesses?
Yeah, so what Edgar does that's unique in particular, so there's a lot of tools out there now that allow you to, post on multiple social media platforms like Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. What's really fundamentally different about Edgar is that with Edgar, you store a library of all of your content in categories. So one, that alone allows you to move from seeing social media as this sort of haphazard one-off panic, I have to send an update, to you really have a body of content that you can continue to curate and improve. And then the other big thing that Edgar does is it takes this body of content, and we like to call Edgar he instead of it. It's just nicer. He pulls your content on your social accounts and he cycles through them over and over again. So with most social media tools, you have to refill your queue over and over again, or you have to manually schedule every update. Edgar does that for you. Edgar says, here's the content, I'm going to send it out on your networks. And when he finishes one category, he just goes right back to the top and sends it again.
Wow. See, that's, again, it's a concept that only recently, and I'll kind of give it some back end. My dad and I started a bicycle business, and my dad had restored vintage Schwinn's, and we needed a way to kind of sell them because he's like, hey, I have a bunch in my garage, I want to actually sell them. And I'm like, okay, cool. And so I was like, gosh, maybe eBay, what is the marketplace for this? We can go to fairs or whatever, but how am I actually going to develop this? And so I threw them up on eBay, and we saw some traction, not a whole lot. And then I was like, okay, maybe it's worth throwing it on Pinterest. And so I threw it up on Pinterest. All of a sudden our sales exploded, and we sold way more than we ever thought of. And so we tried to, cross-pollinating and, Instagrams and things like that, and Facebook, and trying to see if we can gain traction in all of those. And sales continued to the point where we didn't have any more bikes. And my dad was like, I can't make enough bikes to fulfill, the desire of our clients. And so all of a sudden I saw, okay, there's a value for this.
Mm.
Now, one of my questions for you, and one of the fears that I had is, does it have to be a niche market in order to use a service like Edgar?
No, it doesn't have to be a niche market because social media is just a channel for exposure,
Huh.
right? You put up a picture on Pinterest and then all of a sudden thousands or millions or whatever of people that never knew you existed know you exist because they have a way to discover you. So I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about social media because we often use it obviously just for fun, just for our personal lives. And that's how most people come into social media, right? They have a Facebook account or a Twitter account that they're just using to chat with their friends. The way you use social to market a business is very different than how you're using it to
Huh.
connect with friends. So I think people get confused thinking like, yeah, well, I'm selling bikes. Like, how do I chat with people and share personal photos to sell bikes? Like, that's not how you sell bikes.
Yeah. Man, that's it. One of the things that I'm trying to dig into, and my wife is so good about helping me with this, but is this idea of, if I post something on Instagram, it may not do as well, and the keywords and the things that I'm posting there may not do as well on Facebook. How do I, if we're cross pollinating and doing all these different things and trying to get it up on everything, how do you make sure your keywords are there? How do you make sure that people are searching those specific things? What does Edgar help us do when it comes to that?
Well, so people, I mean, for the most part, aren't finding social via keywords and definitely not on
Huh.
Facebook. On
That's good.
Instagram, so there's the first step. Yeah.
Yeah.
On Instagram, there definitely is more likelihood that someone will click a hashtag and see the photos associated with it. That happens sometimes. Although that's a way you kind of discover people are more often just seeing what's in their feed, but of course they have to have a way to find new things to put in their feed, which hashtags can help with. Facebook, that behavior is just not on Facebook. So
Huh.
Facebook, the way that new people discover you is because someone who already follows you shared your stuff, which is also the same on Twitter. That sharing functionality doesn't exist on Instagram except for in sort of a like hacky way where people regram, where they
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
take
Yeah.
a screenshot, but it's not built into the tool. So yeah, so Facebook and Twitter are all about creating content that's compelling enough that someone would hit that, share or that retweet button, and then that's how you get exposed to a new
Huh.
audience.
And so Edgar is going to help us do that, correct?
Yeah, so what the reason that Edgar's really helpful is because it just he makes sure that you have content going out every day. So if you're
Hmm.
not using a tool like Edgar, you're doing this all manually. And if
Yeah.
you're a solopreneur or a small business owner, that's not happening. You're not sending out 5 social updates a day, right? So the big thing Edgar does is just is ensuring, because software is doing it instead of a human doing it, that you have as many posts as you want going out every single day without having to go in and mess with it. But so you're still creating all the content. So it's not like Edgar's creating content for you. You really need to create the content for your
Mhm.
business. That's kind of a human job, not really a software job. So you're going in, choosing images, choosing your hashtags or whatever it is for the various platforms.
Okay. That's kind of where my understanding stops. Is okay, I know I need to do it differently, but what do I need to do on those sites? So it's good to know that there still is a human element involved in this. For the majority of our listeners are selling on Amazon and eBay. What is a way that you would approach that business
Mhm.
and bring it into the Edgar model?
Well, actually, it's not so. In those businesses in particular, you might be using tools more that aren't on Edgar. So, like Pinterest can, as you mentioned, for your business, be really huge. Edgar's not a Pinterest tool. Pinterest is a totally different beast, as you know, if you've ever
Yes.
used Pinterest. So, I would really recommend a Pinterest specific tool, like Tailwind is a great tool. There's a few of them out there, but so yeah, Edgar supports Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Twitter and Facebook are still huge platforms for any business. LinkedIn for an e-commerce business, probably not so much. Probably
Okay.
kind of a waste of time. But Facebook, I mean Twitter also, but Facebook in particular, I just would recommend pretty much if you're interested in doing social, you should have a presence on Facebook
Mm.
because it's still by far the biggest network out there.
Okay, that's good. What about those? I know some of the people listening are creating courses or creating content.
Mhm,
What would
mhm,
you suggest for them to build first off, build a social media platform, and then
mhm.
second, integrate Edgar into that process?
So yeah, we actually have we have more customers on that side. We have a lot of people doing consulting, coaching, online training. So the first place to start with those, I mean, one, if you are the trainer in your business, which I've, ran one of those where I was the face, I was creating content, putting your social in your name is a really great choice because it's
Huh.
always easier for people to connect with a human than just a brand, which is something that in
Wow.
e-commerce businesses usually doesn't make so much sense, right? You're usually kind of focusing more on the product. The good thing about doing training is you do have that option to make yourself or whoever the trainer is the face of the business, which you're just going to get a lot more like you're going to get a lot more people following you back on Twitter when they're talking to a person rather than
Mm.
following a brand.
That's man, I'm just thinking about all these different pages that I follow, and I follow them for the person rather than necessarily the content. Even some of
Mm,
the clothing brands that I follow, I'm like, oh, I follow you because you're showing people's faces and their real stories and they're
mm,
about real things. So I think that clicks with my brain, and if it's clicking with my brain, I hope it's clicking with the rest of you guys, because that human element is so important. And what would you suggest? Okay, so I've started my business.
mhm,
What would you suggest? Obviously, having that under your name, that's a
mhm.
great start. What about when I start posting? What are some of the things that are some important elements to that posting process?
So, whatever kind of business you have, the whole point of social media is to post content that will be shared, because
Uh,
that's how you grow your following, right? So, if you are a consulting type of business, that might be more like inspirational quotes that people share. If you're e-commerce and you're lucky enough to have a product that looks cool, like restored Schwinn bicycles, which I'm sure looks super cool, you actually have the luxury of just literally posting a nice looking image of your product. And then on platforms like Pinterest, that can get widely shared, which to me, I'm like, oh, that sounds like you're a lucky, a lucky business. But that's kind of a grass is greener thing, I'm sure. So like for my business, we're software, so we don't have those cool visuals, right? There's
yeah.
nothing really to show. So we're sharing useful content about social media marketing, about entrepreneurship, inspirational content about entrepreneurship, because that's what our audience is interested in. And that's what we see them sharing. And then it's so important to share content back to your own that links back to your own website, which is
Mm.
why you need to be creating content too. So again, for e-commerce, it might be as simple as literally linking to your product, but you also want to do some storytelling around the product to bring in that human element, like we were talking about earlier. So I hope that you guys have some content for your bicycle business about like the father and son element,
Uh,
restoring it in the garage. Do you guys share any of that?
we do, like, in the initial conversation, the initial few pictures, it was talking about, this is Brian Woodward, this is what we've created, but we haven't continued following that theme, and I think that's a good reminder of like, hey, this is a father and son team. I love, man, I love what you said about storytelling, because that's gosh, I think about, even the podcasts I listen to, like Radio
Mm,
Lab. I don't know if you guys have ever listened to them, but it's a fantastic podcast because they talk about crazy stories. And being able to tell a story even about a product, for the Amazon sellers, if you find a crazy thing at a garage sale, post about it on your Facebook
right.
page. That's a great idea. I love that.
Yeah, yeah, you can always work the human element in with whatever you do, and that's much more shareable,
Mm.
especially if you're in sort of a boring product, right? So we're all not so lucky to have something that visually looks really cool to share. But yeah, if you can tell the story of the people who created it, why it was created, an interesting thing about the business, like it being a
Mm.
father-son team, people are always really interested in those human stories, and you should be storing stories like that on your blog and sharing those links back to your blog on social media.
Yeah, you just brought it back to sharing, and I think that that's a point that is kind of driving into my head right now of it's really important to build content that people will want to share.
Mhm,
That's
mhm.
why haven't I ever thought of that? Like, this is why you're the professional, I'm not. Well, it's all about the sharing process, building content that's about sharing. That's so good. Like, I love to share stuff like that. Why haven't I thought about my posts being like that?
Well, and it is, I think it is always useful to kind of take a step back and look at your own behavior as a consumer of social
Hmm.
media, and notice what does get me to hit the share button on Facebook, what does get me to hit that retweet, because we do it kind of mindlessly. It can be interesting to like look through your own accounts and kind of dissect, like, what was it? Why did I find that so compelling? Was it really funny?
Huh.
Did I think that my friends would think I found something really interesting that no one else had found?
Huh. You just used the word compelling and then funny, and I love that, because in my mind compelling has to be this emotional experience, but that emotion doesn't necessarily have to be sad, or it
Hmm.
can be funny. Compelling can be funny, and I don't know that I necessarily attach those two things. And obviously most other people could, but in my mind I'm like, oh, if I'm gonna do a post, it's got to be inspirational and it's got to be this. But honestly, my Instagram is a joke. Like I just love to, like, for an entire series, I just, like, I did posts with a stormtrooper helmet on. Like I just, like, for me, I don't necessarily care about having these inspirational quotes. It's more that
Right.
I want to bring laughter to somebody's life, and if I can do that, I've succeeded. And I love, because I haven't thought of that necessarily as compelling, but I've gotten more attention based on those pictures than I have for when I've done, an inspirational quote about whatever.
Well, because that's true to you, and that's
Yeah.
what's so fun about this. We all get to do what's authentic to us,
Mm.
what's true to us, and that connects with people. And I mean, of course, funny is compelling. I mean, I don't know about you, when I look through my Facebook, it's a ton of video clips from like Jimmy Kimmel and Ellen, and like people love to share funny videos on the internet, of course.
Man, my brain is spinning, and I keep hearing the voice of my wife of like, we've got to do this, because it's true. Like, just because I'm running an Amazon business doesn't mean that it can't be represented on my Facebook page. I think about all of these forums that I'm a part of, and all these different groups that I'm a part of. If I've got a great story on how I was in the middle of Walmart and the manager starts yelling at me, that's a great story. Like, I'm just like, my brain is spinning of all these different things that I could talk about, of like, I was out doing retail arbitrage, or I had a crazy
Mm.
encounter with this vendor that ultimately, like you said in the beginning, it's got a link to your bio, it's got a link to your page, it's got a link to your product, and ultimately it's going to drive traffic to that. And maybe somebody's like, oh, actually I was looking for that, Lollapalooza or Palooza, whatever it's called, that specific toy that manager yelled about. And it's I gosh, my brain's spinning now, because there's a reality that, as Amazon, eBay sellers, we don't always see a value to that. And if you were to give any encouragement to our community to press into this, what would it be?
I mean, just start where you're at. Social
Mm.
media is so overwhelming. There's so many platforms. You can post all day long. You can spend all day doing this, right? So that's why it's important to really think about social media as a strategic channel. It's so many people get like real gung-ho excited and then just waste so much time and then say, I don't have time for social. I have a business to run, right? Gets totally burnt out. So be more strategic and, a tool like Edgar is so great because it just provides that bread and butter content
Mm.
every day. So that because some days you come up with this great organic content, right? Like some days you have something hilarious happen at Walmart and you can make it into a post and share it everywhere. Not every day.
Yeah.
So using Edgar, it's like, here's my links, here's my stuff that's going out just every day. So I don't have to panic every day about something to share.
Yeah.
And then it gives me like a little more freedom and a little more breathing room to say, and then I'm going to look out for opportunities to share those funny moments, to do something like weird and wacky that I'm having fun with
Yeah.
on top of that, but I don't have to be dependent on coming up with something super creative every day.
It really is getting my gears moving. And what would be the number one downfall that you've seen with people using Edgar, or maybe it's not using it to the correct ability?
Mm,
What would it be that your suggestion, if that people choose to use this service, what would be
mm.
your best suggestion for them in the midst of using it?
Well, people get worried. So, like I mentioned, Edgar repeats content, and that freaks a lot of people out. I mean, people ask us all the time, are you allowed to repeat content? So, yes, you
Uh,
are allowed to repeat content. And the reason you want to repeat content is because 5 to 10% of the people who are following you see anything that you post. So if you've spent the time to come up with a post, you really want to post it again. And I've seen from our thousands of customers, it gets the same engagement every time. I've seen things that have been posted literally every 2 weeks, which is pretty frequent. Most people aren't posting things that often, and it'll get the same retweets, like the same traffic 2 weeks later, because it's not the same people seeing it. Or if it is, they're like, oh, I read it before and I liked it. This time I'm going to share it. Just because they've seen it before doesn't mean there's not going to be any engagement there. So people get kind of freaked out thinking like, I have to have this massive library, and you can repeat more often than you think you can.
That's interesting, because you're totally right. I only see 10% of what people post. And when I'm going through my feed, sometimes I have to go back and look at certain people's, especially with the new algorithm that Instagram has, is I'm not always seeing the people in my list. And so if there's people I want to follow and people I want to catch up with, I may miss 5 or 6 pictures because it's only showing me this much. So I that's really good. My question is, would you, or does Edgar do the same post 2 days in a row, or is there a split between that?
So the way Edgar works is you determine your schedule based on category.
Okay.
So let's say you have inspirational quotes that you want to send out. So you load up a library of, 20 to 50 to 500 or whatever inspirational quotes. And then you tell Edgar, okay, I want to send one of these out 3 times a week. So if you have 30 of them, right? So how frequently they repeat depends on how many you have in your category and how often you have them on your schedule. But a really easy way to use Edgar, if you're kind of worried about not having enough, is to just post a little less frequently in the beginning while you build up that library over time. Because the thing is, you're already creating this huge library. If you're using social, you're just not saving any of it, right? You're wasting it all. You're sending it out once and then never again. So it's not like you're doing more work. You're just doing the work you already did, except now you're saving it. So you don't have to do it in the future.
So it sounds like it's kind of one day of putting a lot of content into Edgar, and then you can kind of just hands off for a little bit. Is that right?
So our philosophy at Edgar is let software do what software can do so that humans can do what humans can do, right? So software can send out your post. You don't need to be there live at 3 p.m. hitting the send button, right? Software can do that. So let Edgar send out your post so that you can go in every day, check in on your social networks, retweet, share, relationship build. That's the social part of social media, and that's also really important.
What I think is here is that there's an opportunity to kind of draw out what my my fear is, that obviously I'm going to annoy people with too many posts a day. The second part of that is that there's too much content out there already, and I don't want to saturate it with more, and it's just going to kind of get messed in the jumble of Amazon people posting all day. But I do have a story to tell, and that's kind of what I want to end it on, is this same thing of like, we all have a story to tell. We all have something that's happened in this journey, and that's important to tell. And ultimately, once you start telling that story, it seems like, at least for me, I kind of start thinking about other stories that I've had happen, and then I start seeing other people's. My last question would be, do you recommend reposting other people's stuff?
Yes. Yes. So one of our default categories in library, we call it OPC, for other people's content. You absolutely want to link to anything, all the types of things you post on social. One of the easiest things about social, it doesn't have to be all unique content, right? You can share what other people have created. That's absolutely a really important part of the mix.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for all of the knowledge. If you guys want to go find out more about Edgar, go to theonlineempireacademy.com/Edgar, and you can find all of their content there. Well, thank you so much for being on. Seriously, so much great knowledge here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you guys listening, and I hope you were motivated by our guests today. Again, our podcast sponsor for the day was the Yorba Label Company. If you want to get that 25% off of 3,000 address labels, I know I already got mine, and I'm so excited about them. They're fantastic. Go on to Amazon.com, search address labels. You're going to find them under Perfect Peel Address Labels. Click on it in the checkout, go to the promo section or the promo code, and type in labels 25. Again, that's going to secure you that 25% off. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate it, guys. Until next time, Empire, have a fantastic day.